My $8,500 wedding cake was utterly ruined. And it turned out to be the smartest money I ever spent. Why? Because sprawled in that vivid crimson chaos was my own sister, slipping into a heavy sleep. She had deliberately spiked my drink at my wedding, hoping to make me look like a sloppy drunk in front of my rich in-laws. I let her think she'd won, but the cost was far steeper. One quiet glass switch, a practiced smile, and the payoff was the most gratifying image of my life, my dear sister crumpling among red velvet crumbs. But to explain why my own sister wanted to sabotage my wedding, I need to rewind to the planning stage. I was Madison, 29 years old, working as a marketing director at a respected firm in Charleston, and I had always taken pride in being composed and rational. My younger sister, Harper, 27, called herself an influencer, which was really a polished way of saying unemployed and living online. What she never shared with her 12,000 followers was the $51,000 in credit card debt she'd been hiding from our parents. My parents, Richard and Elaine, had always favored Harper. Always. It made no sense, no fairness, no logic. I could earn perfect grades, scholarships, promotions. It didn't matter. Harper could upload a selfie with a Pinterest quote and Mom would frame it. Harper's jealousy hit its peak when I got engaged to William. William was an orthopedic surgery resident at the medical university. Smart and gentle, with hands that rebuild shattered bones and a smile that stops my heart. But what truly sent Harper spiraling wasn't his work or his character. It was his last name. William came from old Charleston money. The kind of family whose ancestors signed historic papers and had ships named after them. The kind of family still invited to garden parties at preserved estates. The kind of access Harper desperately wanted. During the wedding planning, she became unbearable. It began 3 months before the ceremony. I was in my apartment reviewing vendor contracts when Harper showed up without warning. She walked in wearing yoga pants pricier than most people's monthly groceries and carrying a designer bag I knew she couldn't afford. "I've been thinking," she said, skipping any greeting. "I should be your maid of honor." I looked up from my spreadsheet. "Madison, I already asked Natalie. Your lawyer friend." She scrunched her nose like something smelled foul. "Madison, this is a wedding with old money vibes. Do you really want someone who lives in pantsuits standing beside you in photos headed for the society pages? Natalie is my best friend. She stood by me through everything. And I'm your sister." Harper's voice took on that familiar whine. "Your only sister. What will people think if your own blood isn't your maid of honor? It'll look like we're distant. It'll look bad for both of us. Guys, I need this. Madison, do you know how amazing this would be for my brand? A wedding at the historic Charleston Hotel with William's family. I could gain thousands of followers. I should have said no right there. I should have stood firm. But then she called Mom. 2 hours later, both our parents were at my door. Mom was already blotting her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. And Dad wore that disappointed look, the one he'd perfected over decades of making me feel guilty for existing. "Madison, sweetheart," Mom said, taking my hands. "Harper is devastated. Completely devastated. She feels like you don't love her." "That's not, I never said that. I just wanted your sister is having a hard time right now." Dad cut in, his voice carrying that final, commanding tone he used when the decision was already made. "The least you can do is include her in your special day. Make her feel appreciated. Just humor your sister," Mom added, squeezing my fingers. "Don't upset her. It's only one day, Madison. Surely you can be kind for one day." The manipulation was familiar and precise. They'd done this my whole life, turning Harper's emotions into my duty, her joy into my obligation. "Fine," I said. The word burned going down. "You can be the maid of honor." Harper shrieked and clapped. Mom smiled brightly. Dad gave a satisfied nod. Natalie, when I called to tell her, went quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Are you sure about this, Mads?" "No," I said honestly, "but it's easier than fighting all of them." Easier isn't always better. He was right, of course. But I'd already made my first mistake. I'd already agreed. I didn't know then that this single concession had cleared the path for Harper's cruelest move. 2 weeks before the wedding, Harper texted me, "Need you to pay for my bridesmaid dress. I'm a little short this month." The dress she'd picked without asking me was an $1,800 silk gown from a boutique that required appointments and poured champagne during fittings. When I suggested cheaper options for the bridesmaids, she actually laughed. "You're marrying into old money, Madison. We can't look cheap in the photos. What would William's family think?" I sent the money. Didn't argue once. Looking back now, standing in that ballroom knowing what she planned to do to me, I see it all clearly. Every demand, every guilt trip, every time our parents forced me to shrink so her ego could grow, it all led to that moment. Harper didn't want to share my wedding. She wanted to ruin it, and I nearly let her. The Charleston Historic Hotel ballroom looked like a postcard of Southern refinement. Crystal chandeliers washed the room in warm light over round tables draped in ivory silk. Each centerpiece spilled white roses and trailing ivy. The polished hardwood floors shone, mirroring the glow of hundreds of candles. At the far end of the room, on its own table, stood the focal point that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The wedding cake. 6 tiers of flawless red velvet. Each layer wrapped in ivory fondant and accented with edible gold leaf that shimmered like scattered stars. Handcrafted sugar flowers, peonies, roses, gardenias cascaded down one side in a stunning display of the baker's skill. Cost $8,500, and it was worth every cent, though not for the reasons I once believed. I sat at the head table, exactly where I'd placed myself on my carefully planned seating chart. As a marketing director, I understand image, angles, how a single photo can shape or shatter perception. I'd spent hours designing this layout. William sat to my left, devastatingly handsome in his tailored tux, dark hair perfectly styled, his hand warm over mine on the white linen. To my right sat Harper, squeezed into a champagne silk gown that likely cost more than she'd admit. Her hair was pinned into an intricate updo that must have taken hours. Beside William was David, his best friend and best man, a cardiologist with an easy smile and a calm presence that suited him perfectly. I'd given the hotel staff very specific instructions. Husband on the left meant that in nearly every photo of us together, we'd be facing one another. My angles would always flatter. The lighting would hit just right. I thought I'd accounted for everything. In front of each of us sat identical crystal champagne flutes provided by the hotel. No markings, no engravings, nothing to tell them apart. They caught the candlelight as bubbles rose in smooth golden streams through the expensive vintage Williams family had chosen for the toast. The main course had just been taken away. Herb-crusted lamb with roasted vegetables arranged like artwork. Servers moved smoothly between tables. The soft clatter of silverware and plates formed an elegant background rhythm. Conversations buzzed around us, broken by bursts of laughter from William's college friends at table 7. William leaned in close, his breath warm near my ear. "Did you see Uncle Thomas trying to flirt with your great-aunt Miriam? I think he's had too much wine." I laughed and turned fully to my left, my body angling toward my new husband. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement to my right, Harper's hand. Her hand slid across the table with practiced ease, reaching as if to straighten my place card, which had shifted slightly during dinner. A harmless gesture, even thoughtful. But as her palm brushed past my champagne flute, it tipped just enough. The clear liquid from a tiny vial hidden in her hand slipped into my glass and vanished instantly among the bubbles. The carbonation masked everything. No color shift, no trace, nothing to suggest anything was different. She withdrew her hand quickly, adjusting my place card with a small, pleased smile. She thought no one noticed, but Harper had forgotten about Natalie. My best friend since law school sat at the VIP table directly across from us, positioned with a perfect view of the head table. While Harper focused on me, on William, on making sure we stayed distracted, she completely ignored the woman with a criminal defense attorney's eye for detail and instincts sharpened by years of studying how crimes unfold. Natalie saw it all. The smooth reach, the falling liquid, the sudden smirk. My phone, face up beside my champagne flute, vibrated. Buzzed. The sound was faint, swallowed by the noise of 200 guests celebrating, but I felt it. Saw the screen glow with a new message. I looked down. An iMessage from Natalie. 5 short words, all in capitals. "Swap glasses." She drugged it. My heart stopped. Truly stopped, then slammed back into motion with a painful jolt I felt in my throat, my chest, my fingertips. The room tipped slightly, the chandelier light suddenly harsh, the sounds around me suddenly overwhelming. I went still, every muscle locking in place. But years of client pitches, high-pressure meetings, holding steady when campaigns collapsed or executives panicked, all of that training kicked in. My expression stayed calm, neutral, maybe faintly concerned, just another bride glancing at her phone during her reception. Nothing more. I slowly lifted my eyes and met Natalie's gaze across the room. She gave the smallest nod, firm and certain. He was sure. I looked back down at the champagne flute in front of me. The golden liquid shimmered innocently, bubbles rising in flawless streams. It looked exactly like William's glass, exactly like David's, exactly like Harper's, but it wasn't. This wasn't ordinary sibling jealousy anymore. This wasn't Harper sulking or demanding or running to our parents. This was deliberate. A calculated move meant to destroy my image in front of my husband's family. She had planned this and waited for the right moment. She wanted me to drink it. Wanted me disoriented, sloppy, confused. Wanted William's prestigious old money family to watch me embarrass myself. To see their new daughter-in-law as a drunk, as someone unworthy of their son. Someone who couldn't even manage herself on her wedding day. The people-pleaser in me, the one who spent 29 years swallowing my needs, smoothing Harper's moods, nodding whenever our parents demanded I make her happy, that version of Madison died right then. I knew I had to move. Had to switch the glasses somehow. Turn Harper's plan against her. But she was right there, less than 2 feet away, her eyes fixed on both champagne flutes like a hawk tracking its prey. I remained locked in my chair, sharply conscious of every sensation. The solid feel of my phone in my palm, the moisture beating on the outside of the tainted champagne flute, the sound of Harper's breathing beside me, fast and eager, already savoring her win. He was tracking those glasses, both of them. I couldn't move, couldn't react. Not while her attention stayed fixed. I needed a moment, a diversion. I waited, pulse hammering. William squeezed my hand, mistaking my stiffness for normal wedding nerves. Hey, he whispered. Perfect, I said. The lie slid out easily. And then fate delivered the most formidable woman I'd ever encountered. I heard it. The sharp click of heels on polished wood. Designer heels, the kind that cost more than some people's monthly car payments. The sound came from behind us, from the direction of the VIP waiting room, a private space the hotel had set aside for close family to step away, fix makeup, breathe. The door opened. Mrs. Eleanor emerged. William's mother carried power in a 5'6" frame. Her Oscar de la Renta gown, navy silk with detailed beading that likely cost more than my car, fit her flawlessly. Her silver hair was styled with precision, diamond earrings catching the light. She'd clearly refreshed her makeup, her lips now a crisp classic red. She moved along the back of our row of chairs, passing directly behind the head table. Click, click, click. Her heels cut cleanly through the brief lull between courses, audible above the low murmur of conversation. I felt Harper tense beside me. If there was one thing my sister couldn't resist, it was the chance to impress someone powerful. And Mrs. Eleanor was the most powerful person in that room. The matriarch of a family whose name sat on buildings and scholarship funds, whose approval opened doors or sealed them shut. Harper's head snapped around so fast it was almost comical. She sprang from her chair, stepping straight into Mrs. Eleanor's path with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever reunited with its owner. Oh, Mrs. Eleanor. Harper's voice jumped an octave, dripping with practiced sweetness. Were you resting in the VIP room too? I hope the reception isn't too much for you. These events can be exhausting, especially with everyone wanting your attention. She had fully turned her back to the table. To me. To the glasses. In my mind, Natalie's message flashed like a warning sign. Swap glasses. This was it. My only opening. My hands slid to the bases of both champagne flutes. My fingers stayed steady. Years of handling fragile presentation materials had trained a precision I'd never valued until now. I didn't lift them. That would draw eyes. Even with Harper distracted, someone might notice, a guest, a server, even William if he glanced down. Instead, I moved them sideways. Behind me, my sister's voice continued. I must say, Harper went on without waiting for a reply, reaching out to lightly brush the sleeve of Mrs. Eleanor's gown. This Oscar de la Renta dress was made for you. The beading, the cut, it's perfection. You have such an incredible sense of style. I was just telling Madison earlier how stunning you look. Truly elegant. The silk tablecloth was ideal, expensive and smooth, offering just enough resistance to guide the motion without stopping it. I applied gentle pressure to the bases, nudging my poisoned glass toward Harper's place while drawing her untouched glass toward mine. They slid across the fabric like figure skaters on ice, hovering just above the surface, the liquid inside barely disturbed. Swish. I subtly rotated the new glass in place, turning it so the faint lipstick mark Harper had left on the rim faced away from where she'd been sitting. The whole motion took 5 seconds, exactly the time it took Harper to finish her over-the-top compliment about the dress and launch into how much she admired Mrs. Eleanor's charitable work with the Children's Hospital. No one noticed. The servers were clustered at the far end of the ballroom. Guests were wrapped up in their own conversations. William was focused on his Uncle Thomas, who had in fact cornered my great-aunt Miriam near the bar, but Natalie noticed. I flicked my gaze toward the VIP table. She held her wine glass casually, but her eyes were locked on me. When our eyes met, one corner of her mouth lifted in the faintest smile. She tipped her glass just slightly, a private toast meant only for me. My safety net had worked exactly as planned, and I knew with complete certainty that Natalie wouldn't look away from my sister for the rest of the night. She would observe. He would remember. She would be ready. Mrs. Eleanor slipped free from Harper's attention with the polished ease of someone who'd managed social climbers for decades. "How kind of you to say so, dear. If you'll excuse me, I should return to my table." She drifted off, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume. Harper turned back toward her seat and nearly bounced into her chair, her face glowing with victory. She believed she'd just earned serious favor with my mother-in-law, convinced she'd scored a networking win worthy of an Instagram story later. Her eyes dropped to the table. The 2 champagne flutes sat exactly as before. Same placement, same level, same harmless sparkle of golden bubbles. Her gaze lingered for half a second, then moved on. No doubt, no hesitation. Why would there be? They were identical. And her confidence, her absolute belief that she'd outplayed me and that her scheme was perfect, erased any urge to double-check. She reached for the glass in front of her. The drugged one. Her smile was sharp and triumphant. "Come now," she said, lifting the crystal flute toward me. "Let's toast to your happiness, Madison." I raised my untouched glass, shaping my face into a smile layered with meaning. Every ounce of patience I'd stored, every delay of justice, every year of being told to bend for her comfort, I poured into that expression. "Thank you, sister," I replied quietly. "To a night we cannot forget." The crystal rims met with a clear ringing chime that echoed across our corner of the table. Click. Harper tipped the glass to her lips and drank deeply, her eyes never leaving mine. She believed she was watching her plan succeed. Believed she was witnessing the first step of my humiliation. I took a measured sip of my clean champagne and watched her swallow her own fate. The colorless liquid, melatonin or whatever dose she'd prepared for me, slid down her throat mixed with the expensive vintage. She placed the glass down with a pleased sigh, still smiling. I smiled back and waited. After the toast I played my part. I needed to sell it. I needed Harper to believe everything was unfolding exactly as she'd designed. So I grew quiet. I angled slightly away from the table conversation and let my smile soften into something muted and distant. When William asked about the timing of dessert service, I answered vaguely, my voice low. When David pulled me into a joke about the worst wedding speeches they'd endured in medical school, I managed only a faint laugh. Harper caught it instantly. I felt her attention sharpen, sensed her leaning closer, studying my face for signs the drug was taking hold. I gave her exactly what she wanted. A bride growing withdrawn, a little detached, just slightly unfocused. The corner of her mouth curled upward. He thought it was working. He thought I was starting to feel the effects of the melatonin. That in just a few minutes I'd be swaying, slurring my words, turning into a spectacle in front of 200 guests and William's entire family. She leaned back in her chair, practically buzzing with excitement, her confidence growing with every passing second. What Harper didn't realize, what her self-obsession blinded her to, was that the drug was in her body now, already absorbing into her bloodstream and beginning its path to her brain. The MC's voice came through the speakers, smooth and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite the best man to say a few words." The ballroom settled, conversations fading as guests turned toward the small stage near the cake table. David stood, fastening his jacket with an easy smile. I glanced at the time. The night was moving exactly as planned, just after 8 o'clock. He walked to the microphone and within moments had the entire room laughing. Stories about William's awful cooking during residency, the time he showed up to a formal hospital presentation wearing mismatched shoes. The moment David knew William was serious about me because he'd started doing his own laundry instead of buying new clothes when he ran out of clean ones. The timing couldn't have been better. David's speech created a buffer, a stretch where every eye was focused elsewhere, where the subtle shifts beginning in Harper's body went unnoticed in the dim ballroom. I watched her from the edge of my vision. She was still smiling, still performing as the devoted maid of honor, but I caught the small things. The way she shifted in her chair. How her hand lifted briefly to her temple. The faint line forming between her brows. The melatonin was starting to take effect. Liquid melatonin works faster than pills, absorbing quickly into the bloodstream. Harper would be feeling it now, a gentle heaviness in her arms and legs, a soft haze creeping into her thoughts, but she'd chalk it up to nerves about her speech or the champagne hitting harder than usual. She'd never suspect the truth. David wrapped up to loud applause and headed back to his seat, giving William a quick clap on the shoulder as he passed. William stood to hug him, the two of them sharing a moment that set off a burst of camera flashes. The MC stepped back to the microphone. "Thank you, David. And now we'd love to hear from the maid of honor." The moment had come. Harper rose from her chair. I watched closely, taking in every detail. The way she steadied herself with a hand on the table. The brief hesitation before stepping away as if collecting her balance. The forced brightness in her smile that never quite reached her eyes. He thought it was nerves. Thought it was the normal anxiety of speaking in front of a crowd. I knew better. The drug was settling in, creating that familiar light-headed feeling, making her limbs feel heavy and slightly detached. In another 10 minutes she'd be struggling to keep her eyes open. But right now she still had enough awareness, enough diluted confidence to believe she was in control. She walked toward the stage, her steps maybe just a touch slower than usual, but still steady, heading straight to the spot she'd likely planned for days, right beside the cake tower. Of course she did. The $8,500 red velvet masterpiece with its edible gold leaf and handcrafted sugar flowers was the perfect backdrop for the photos she'd post later. The expensive cake signaled wealth, status, proximity to old money. Visible proof in her mind that she'd made it, that she belonged in this world. She placed herself as close to the cake table as she could, closer than the catering staff probably preferred. Her left hand held a freshly topped-off wine glass, and her right accepted the wireless microphone from the MC. The microphone, that sleek, dangerous wireless microphone that carried every word across the ballroom through the premium sound system Williams' family had paid extra for. Harper never considered that. Never thought about what might happen if her words slipped, if whatever was in her system stripped away her filter and loosened her tongue. She simply smiled at the crowd and began. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice rang out clean and strong through the speakers. "For those who don't know me, I'm Harper, Madison's sister and her maid of honor." Her words were still steady, still measured, but I could see the strain, the way she held herself a bit too rigid, like someone fighting the urge to sway. "I've known Madison my whole life, obviously." He paused, milking the moment. "And I have to say, it's been quite a journey watching her finally find someone worthy of her." Polite laughter rippled through the room. Madison has always been the responsible one, the organized one, the one with flawless plans and a flawless career. There was an edge creeping into her tone now, something sharp beneath the sugary surface. And now she has the perfect husband from the perfect family. I sat below the stage, my hand finding Williams and squeezing hard. He squeezed back, unaware of what was unfolding. No one was ready. Harper lifted her wine glass slightly, the liquid flashing under the lights. "So here's to Madison," she said, her smile wide, fake and toxic. "To my perfect sister and her perfect life." Guests murmured approval, glasses lifting around the room. I stayed still, watching, waiting for the moment the melatonin took hold, waiting for karma to land, waiting for my sister to fall. The applause from her speech still echoed when Harper raised her glass higher. That practiced smile stretched across her face. She played the role beautifully, the loving sister, the supportive bridesmaid, the image of family harmony. But I knew the truth. I always had. "To my sister and her new husband," she declared, her voice taking on that dramatic cadence she used in her social media videos. "May your marriage be everything mine will be someday." The room hummed with approval. Under the table, William's hand slid into mine, warm and steady. I watched Harper lift the crystal flute to her lips, my original glass, the one she had so carefully tampered with, and take a long, victorious sip. The change wasn't instant. She lowered the glass, still smiling, still performing. Then I saw it. The faint wobble in her stance, the way her free hand reached for the podium as if the ground had shifted. "Thank you all," she said, her words softening at the edges. She blinked fast, her eyelids suddenly heavy. The crystal flute shook in her grasp. Natalie leaned toward me, her voice barely audible. "How much did she use?" "I don't know," I whispered back, "but from how fast it's hitting her, more than she should have." Harper was swaying now, visibly struggling, her knuckles white around the microphone stand. The ballroom fell silent. 300 guests watching as my sister's carefully built mask collapsed in real time. "Why?" Her voice cracked through the speakers, scared and confused. "Why is the ceiling spinning?" The wine glass slipped from her fingers first, tumbling in slow motion, crystal flashing once before exploding against the stage floor. The sound was sharp and final, like a gunshot in the sudden hush. Then Harper's legs buckled. She pitched forward, her right hand still locked around the microphone as if it could keep her conscious. Her body dropped with the full weight of gravity, no attempt to break the fall, no instinct left to protect herself in her drug-dulled state. The impact was devastating. A crash. 6 towering tiers of red velvet wedding cake, $8,500 of handcrafted perfection. Every layer designed with gold leaf accents and fragile sugar flowers shattered on impact. Harper's face struck first, followed by her entire body, her $1,800 bridesmaid gown diving straight into the collapse like a swimmer hitting the surface. Except this wasn't water. It was buttercream, cake shards, and the dark red interior of crushed velvet layers. The sight was grotesque. White frosting smeared with crimson cake formed something that looked alarmingly like a crime scene. My sister lay still in the ruins, her platinum blonde hair soaked and clumped with icing. Her once elegant dress was ruined beyond saving. It looked as if she'd been violently destroyed in front of 300 stunned guests. My mother's scream cut through the room. "Harper!" But William was already moving. His medical instincts took over before anyone else could react. He was on the stage within seconds, dropping to his knees beside the wreckage, his tux forgotten. "Someone cut the music," he ordered, his tone calm but unquestionable. The jazz quartet went silent at once. William worked quickly, his hands steady and precise. He gripped Harper's shoulder and rolled her firmly onto her side to keep her airway clear, wiping thick buttercream from her mouth and nose. I watched as he checked her pulse at her neck, then lifted her eyelids to examine her pupils, his expression tightening with every second. The entire ballroom seemed to stop breathing. David stood frozen at the head table. Elaine pressed a hand to her chest. My father pushed through the crowd, his face drained of color. The motion of being turned seemed to jolt Harper slightly. Her hand was still clenched around the microphone, the wireless unit scraping across her chin as William repositioned her. In her haze, her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and empty. She stared straight at William, but I knew she wasn't really seeing him. The word came out fractured, barely audible, yet the microphone, now resting close to her lips, amplified it perfectly. Her voice echoed through the speakers, weak and distorted. "Wrong glass. The drugged glass." The confession lingered in the air like smoke. Time froze. Every single person in the ballroom heard it. The words were slurred, confused, but unmistakable. Wrong glass. Drugged glass. There was no escaping what it meant. William's hands went still. Slowly, he lifted his head, his eyes shifting from Harper's limp body to where my parents stood at the edge of the stage. His expression was icy, colder than I had ever seen. "She isn't having a stroke," he said, his voice clinical and exact. "This is synergistic toxicity. Alcohol combined with a central nervous system depressant. These are classic signs of a sedative overdose." My mother made a strangled sound. "What? No, that's not." She wouldn't. William pulled out his phone and called 911, explaining the situation in precise medical terms before ending the call. My father finally found his voice. "This is absurd. Harper would never. There has to be a mistake." William stood, towering over them both. The look he gave them could have frozen fire. "You will go to the hospital with her. I won't involve the police tonight." He paused and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "But if anything else happens, even one more incident, I won't extend that same courtesy." The message was unmistakable. My father, who had spent my entire life overpowering everyone with his will, actually stepped back. He started to speak, then stopped, shut down completely by William's unquestionable authority. The ambulance arrived within minutes, the benefit of being in downtown Charleston. Paramedics lifted Harper onto a gurney, her face streaked with frosting and cake crumbs, her dress beyond saving. My mother climbed into the ambulance without a word, her face twisted into that familiar look of long-suffering martyrdom. My father hovered at the ballroom entrance, glancing back at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Blame, shame, fear. I held his stare without flinching, denying him the comfort of my usual compliance. Then he turned away and the ambulance disappeared into the Charleston night. The ballroom dissolved into chaos. Guests whispered in stunned clusters, hotel staff stood frozen, and the destroyed cake sat there like a crimson monument to the night's collapse. I remained at the head table, William's hand wrapped in mine, and felt something unexpected settle over me. Relief. Simple, undeniable relief. Natalie stepped up beside me, holding her phone like a prize. I recorded everything, she said, her criminal defense instincts as sharp as ever. The fall and the confession. The audio is perfectly clear. She tapped the screen and Harper's drugged voice played out. Wrong glass. The drugged glass. Several nearby guests heard it and the murmurs grew louder. I watched the truth spread through the room like ripples across still water. My sister, the golden child, the cherished youngest, had just admitted to attempted poisoning in front of hundreds of witnesses. The hunter had become the hunted. Eleanor approached us, her Oscar de la Renta gown somehow untouched by the chaos. She looked from the wrecked cake to me, her expression carefully neutral. Well, she said at last, a dry note of humor in her voice. This is certainly the most memorable wedding I've ever attended. The hotel manager appeared, wringing his hands. Mrs. Ashford, I am so terribly sorry about this incident. Should we end the reception given the circumstances? I looked at the ruined cake. Red velvet crumbs scattered across the stage like the aftermath of violence. White frosting smeared across the floor. A 6-tier masterpiece reduced to rubble. $8,500 of destroyed artistry, and all I felt was lighter. I turned to William. His blue eyes searched mine, concerned but never pitying. How are you doing? He asked softly. This is the first time I've seen you breathe easy since we got engaged, he added before I could answer. He was right. For months I'd been tense, managing my family, trying to prevent exactly this kind of explosion. I paid for Harper's dress, included her in everything, bent myself in half to keep the peace, and she still tried to drug me. But now the threat was gone. I faced the hotel manager and smiled a real smile, not the polite mask I'd worn all evening. Clean it up. Bring out more wine and whatever desserts you have in the kitchen. The night is just getting started. He blinked. You want to continue? This is my wedding reception, I said evenly. And I'm going to celebrate with the people who actually care about me. Something shifted in the room after that. Guests who came out of obligation, my parents' friends, society regulars there for appearances, slipped out quietly. The ones who stayed were ours. William's medical school friends, my co-workers Natalie and David, Eleanor, and the family members who truly knew us. The jazz quartet resumed playing. The hotel brought out trays of chocolate torts and lemon tarts. More champagne was opened. Free of my family's shadow, the reception became real. I danced with William beneath the chandeliers, his arms around my waist, and felt years of tension finally let go. No regrets. No, he murmured into my hair. None, I said, and I meant it. Natalie caught my gaze from across the dance floor and lifted her champagne flute in a quiet salute. She had warned me about my family for years, and that night she was proven right in the most dramatic way imaginable. The next morning, sunlight poured through the hotel suite windows. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. How could you let this happen? Harper only did it because she felt excluded. She was overwhelmed seeing you marry into such a wealthy family. He made a mistake. You have to forgive her. Family is family. I read it twice, feeling the familiar pull of guilt try to settle in. The old Madison, the one who spent 29 years chasing her parents' approval, would have replied, would have apologized, would have twisted it into being her fault. But that Madison died somewhere between the glass switch and the cake collapse. I deleted the message without answering. Then I blocked the number. William watched me from the bed, understanding without needing to ask. You okay? Yeah, I said, realizing it was true. I really am. I blocked my father's number next, then Harper's. One by one, I cut the ties that had kept me trapped in their toxicity my entire life. No more sending money to cover Harper's debts. No more guilt-soaked phone calls. No more playing the role of the disappointing daughter. Freedom tasted like the Charleston morning air, clean and salty. 1 year later, William took me to a prenatal appointment at Charleston Medical. I was 8 months pregnant, my belly full and round beneath my sundress. The ultrasound tech smiled as she moved the wand across my skin. "Everything looks perfect," she said. "Your baby girl is healthy and right on track." A daughter. William's hand tightened around mine, his eyes shining with held-back tears. We had talked for months about this moment, about the parents we wanted to be, the family we planned to build. "No golden child," I said softly, repeating the promise we made. "Every child equal," William said. "Boys." We drove home through the historic district, past antebellum houses and oak trees draped in Spanish moss. My phone, new number, new contacts, stayed quiet in my purse. My mother had tried to reach me through mutual acquaintances, leaving messages about wanting to make things right and be part of her grandchild's life. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, are meant to stay ashes. That evening, I sat on our back porch with my laptop, drafting a post for the online forum where I had been sharing my story. The wedding chaos had been too unforgettable to keep entirely private. "Strong opinions. I need your thoughts on a few things," I typed. "Because my family still refuses to leave me alone and I want outside perspectives. Question 1. Was I wrong for swapping the glasses? My mother says a good sister would have poured the wine out instead of letting Harper hurt herself. Question 2. Harper destroyed an $8,500 cake. Should I sue her in civil court for damages or treat it as tuition for her life lesson? Question 3. Do you agree it's better to lose $8,500 to remove toxic people than to preserve a fake perfect wedding? Please leave a comment." I hit post and closed the laptop. Inside, William was making dinner, humming softly to jazz. Through the window I watched him move around our kitchen, our home, our life, built on honesty instead of manipulation. My daughter kicked, a strong flutter against my ribs. I pressed my hand there, feeling the miracle of new life and new beginnings. The wedding cake was destroyed, the bridesmaid dress ruined, my family ties cut, and I had never felt happier. The monster was gone. The cage was open.